Why Women in Science is an organization based at the City College of New York. And we have undergraduates, graduate students, master's students, postdocs, everyone. And really the aim of our organization is to create a community that empowers and supports women in science and really everyone in science. And so every year, this is our third annual Women Making History panel in honor of Women's History Month, which is March. And so thank you all for coming and thank you to our speakers. So I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So we have Dr. Lynne Holden, Professor of Emergency Medicine at Albert Einstein College of Medicine and Vice Chair. Ms. Linda Villarosa, contributing writer for the New York Times, Journalism Program Director and Media and Communication Arts at the City College of New York. Dr. Miranda Stratton, Assistant Director for Biosciences Diversity Programs at Stanford University, and the Director of the Stanford Summer Research Program, the Amgen Scholars Program. And Ms. Carmine Wang, a PhD student at Stony Brook University in the Department of Biomedical Engineering in Dr. Donghui's lab. So I'm going to get started by asking one question, but for the duration of this event, if you would like to ask a question, you can either raise your hand, write it in the chat, or if you want to ask a question anonymously, message it to Marilyn Matthews. Maybe you should just write that in the chat so everyone, in case people join later, will know. But just to start us off with, I guess let's start with, for all the panelists, how did you know that you wanted to pursue your career or career track that you're going through now? Was the path linear, or what are some considerations that influenced your decision-making process? Maybe we can start with Dr. Holden.
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. That's a great question. I would say that my path was actually pretty linear. Since I was 6 years old, I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and that primarily came from watching television. Back in my time, we had a couple shows that I used to watch faithfully after school. Marcus Welby, MD, Rescue 911, and Quincy, ME. I don't know if any of you are familiar with any of those shows, but thank you, Linda. So all of those were, kind of my go-to. I guess it's kind of like the modern time Grey's Anatomy. But I saw that there was something I really wanted to do, that I saw characters that I wanted to emulate what they were doing, helping people, making them feel better, so based on that, I pretty much had horse blinds on that, I wasn't interested in anything else. Come hell or high water, this is what I was going to do. I was going to make it happen. And I guess the rest of my journey really was towards that, whether it was research, whether it was summer programs. I participated in 6 summer programs starting in 11th grade, trying to get more information, constantly in my guidance counselor's office in high school. I entered a 6-year medical program. So it was 2 years of undergrad and 4 years of medical school at Howard University in Washington, DC. But quickly after 2 years, I decided that I needed to stay for 2 more years to find out about art history and social justice and African-American history and so forth. So I actually ended up spending 4 years at Howard University and then 4 years at Temple Medical School. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What about you, Dr. Stratton?
Yeah, so my path is linear in the sense that I went high school to college to graduate school, and now in my role as a student services staff member. However, I think that along the way, there are a lot of questions, a lot of doubts, a lot of imposter syndrome or imposter fears, which I think is a better way to discuss it, because the fear is something that you can, understand, relate to, and connect with it, grow from it. One of my colleagues shared that with me. And so with that, I had mentors along the way who had seen my potential, my ability to grow and be successful. And that was really important because I identify as a former first gen low income college to grad student and as a Mexican and Filipino American woman, so a woman of color, those not having those examples in my immediate family of what it is to be a scientist, it really came from those who I connected with starting in high school. A science teacher saw something in me and she pointed me to a high school internship program over the summer. And so my first paid job was like getting to be a scientist in a lab, not really sure what I was doing, but doing library preps and things like that. And that was my first eye into what a doctor could be beyond a medical doctor, which is what I knew, as Dr. Holden was saying, from seeing media portrayals or just awareness of that. So then from there, mentors again have been my biggest support systems, whether they be other staff or peer mentors, and being able to see my ability to succeed. And I would not be here today without the McNair Scholars Program at the University of San Diego. It really changed my life in being able to equip me with the tools necessary to apply for PhD programs, to have the confidence to say, I belong in a PhD program and I have earned the space to be here. And it's one of those things that when you say you're a McNair scholar and get to connect with someone else who is in the program at another university, it's that familial type of, oh, I understand what you went through. Our paths may have been very different, but I get it. I see you and we're going to look out for each other. And so being able to bridge those connections at Stanford during my PhD was really helpful to make it here. I wavered in wanting to be a faculty member, wanting to do science communication and outreach, wanting to do the work that I do now in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And along the way, my PhD was exploring opportunities that were around advocacy, allyship, and promoting equitable spaces in STEM, because that's what I love to do. That's what brought me into this space and I wanted to pay it forward. And so it didn't feel like a thing that I was checking off to fill something on my resume. It felt important and a part of me in my value system. And so those experiences combined led to me applying for this role, which is in the same office that supported me be successful in my PhD. Shirley knows because she was one of my summer students my first year in this role. And I, as a grad student, mentored students in the same summer program. So I still have a connection to science and I have the ability to see and support future scientists and future doctors in that way. So I'll pass the mic on to someone else.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Dr. Stratton. Ms. Villarosa, would you like to share your thoughts also on your experiences?
Well, first, thank you for having me, and I'm really honored to be speaking with so many other amazing people and to see all of you. I'm very unlinear, okay? I'm nothing, but everyone's surprised at what I'm doing now. Being a science writer, first of all, it's like, how did you even end up doing that? What are you doing at the New York Times magazine? Like, nothing made any sense. So I was very, very radical in college. I'm from Colorado. I went to the University of Colorado. I was like F America with the K's, okay, America. I was like really crazy. So I ended up somehow getting an internship, summer internship in New York at CBS magazines. So I was in this Black program, but placed at a magazine. And I was thinking I'd be placed at a Black magazine because I was like so over Black and blackety black. And instead I got placed at Woman's Day, which is like, what am I doing here? I had an afro that like, it wouldn't even fit in my screen if I had that same hair. And so I was like this angry, radical person who hated the country and hated corporate America at this woman's magazine. But I got with the health editor. Okay. So she was this really calming influence on me and sort of introduced me to the idea that maybe I could be like her. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know. I don't want to work here. I hate New York. So then of everybody in my intern program, I was the one invited back. I think they were just, I was so quirky that they just invited me back. I got a job at a mainstream magazine and I started doing health because of the influence of this mentor, but also because I had been a college athlete and I was always injured. So I knew a lot about the body, no education in this. I studied journalism in undergrad. Then I got a fellowship at the Harvard. So I've been doing sort of nutrition and fitness. Then I got a fellowship for health communications at the T.H. Chang Harvard School of Public Health. And everything shifted for me because I managed to marry the sort of social justice thinking and the activism thinking and calmed it down, cut the hair, with the health and medical in a much more serious way. So that is kind of like how I got there. And then I just kept working hard because I'm not natural at this. I'm not like a natural in science, but I'm really curious and very interested. And I like talking to experts. And I feel like because I don't know a ton, or I mean, I do now, but I feel like I never quite know that much. And I'm always trying to learn. I feel like I'm the go-between between the scientists and the doctors and the public. And so, I had a weird path here, but I'm like right in my own sweet spot.
That's so good to hear, Ms. Villarosa. Lastly, let's hear from Carmen, our last speaker.
So my path, it was pretty linear after high school. During high school, I was mostly like that lost child that didn't know what I was doing half the time until I started taking like advanced placement classes. That's where I met like very passionate teachers on their subjects, and they were the one that encouraged me. Oh, you should go into engineering. And since I liked biology back then, and I didn't actually correlate engineering and biology together, that's when I learned what biomedical engineering was, and I decided, wow, that sounds really cool. And at that time, I also, since I was that really shy, quiet child, I really decided I should change that really. So I reached out to like colleges and asked, hey, I'm a high school student, but like, can I research with you, kind of thing. So during high school, during half of my high school years, from junior year to senior year, I researched with a professor at the SUNY Downstate Medical Center. And he was the one when I asked him, should I pursue like research, a PhD in the future? He was the one that told me, I like you, you're persistent, hardworking. That's what research is. Failure will always be a thing. You just can't let that push you down. And I've failed many times in his lab. It was always a thing, failure in his lab. But he encouraged me. And so after high school, immediately during freshman year at CCNY, yes, I'm a CCNY alumni. At CCNY, I joined a laboratory as a freshman and stayed there until my senior year. And now here I am, a PhD student at Stony Brook, doing biomedical engineering still in Dr. Zhu's lab.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So we can move on to our second question, and that is, are there any strong woman mentors or historical figures who were your inspiration or provided guidance as you progressed through your education or career? So whoever would like to start. Guess we can go in the same order, so we can start with Dr. Holden.
Sure. Yes. So, as Dr. Stratton pointed out, this and Ms. Villarosa and actually Carmine, you can't do it yourself. You have to have a village and mentors, sponsors, a network of supporters who are going to, hold you up. I personally have, I would say, well over 50 people in my career who really took an interest in me and really helped to move me forward. I would say that not all of them look like me. Some were white males, some were Latino. It just varied. I will say that the first person that I really identified with as an African-American female physician, the first two females, are Dr. Muriel Pettioni and Dr. Alyssa Freeman. Dr. Freeman is 95 and still practicing in Harlem. I met them when I was 13 years old. I did a shadowing program during my spring break in 6th grade, and stayed in contact with them and they with me over the course of almost 40 plus years. I will say that they were more than mentors, they were sponsors. They became dear friends. And I just encourage everyone to try to increase your network. I think COVID has put us at, of course, and I can say as an emergency medicine physician, in a terribly tragic situation as a country as during this pandemic, especially populations of color. However, for students who are pursuing science, health and science careers, it's really a unique opportunity where you can reach almost anyone in the world virtually, whether it be through talks or webinars like this, or it's become more acceptable now to contact people via email and having met them in this virtual setting. So the world is really your stage now as far as approaching people and asking them, not in the beginning to be your mentor, but to get to know you, to ask them questions about their career path. And hopefully that will develop, if you're symmetric, into a mentoring relationship and then a sponsorship relationship.
Yeah, I also had some strong mentors that I mentioned before, from my McNair Scholars directors in undergrad. My high school science teacher was a female who identified in me like, hey, you like science, and go do this internship, which also drastically changed my trajectory, because like I said before, I wouldn't have known what science research was without having that opportunity. And then the female scientists that I met in the lab and worked with have been incredible mentors along the way as well. And I agree with Dr. Holden, being able to reach out to folks, have a conversation and hear about their stories, see if there is alignment with your own path, and lessons learned from those who are in places where you would like to be one day, even if you can't see what that path may look like, is an incredible first step. I'm trying to think. Oh yes, I'm also the oldest of 5 daughters. And so I have an inherent network of strong female role models among my 4 younger sisters and my mother as well. And so being able to earn my PhD was a monumental moment for not just me, but for my family. And if any of you have gone to a PhD thesis defense, where you hear someone talk about their science and then they go into the acknowledgements, it's kind of like the Academy Awards thank you part of your PhD. And so for that part, I had not as long of a acknowledgement as my science talk, but it was pretty long. And that was the opportunity to be able to shout out all the mentees that I've had, all those who have guided me along this path to where I am now, and especially be able to have that reminder that, it's those in my network, and for me, my family and my partner being able to support me achieve this next step. And it meant something being the first in my family to do this. We now have inherent trust built in with, talking about science and being able to demystify some of these scientific discoveries that are being talked about in the media, and being able to be that connector, that bridge, that translator for them has been really helpful.
Well, like the other speakers, I've had a lot of mentors in my family, people that didn't look like me. I'm really like help, like support and help, and really appreciate that. But I think in medicine and public health, my person is Dr. Harold Freeman from Harlem Hospital. He was a Black man who was the head of the American Cancer Society, and he coined, sort of like created the term patient navigator to help people at his hospital to sort of figure out, once they got a cancer diagnosis, how, to a real person on the ground, what is my next step, help, to help people through the system. And how I met him was, he had conducted a study in the New England Journal of Medicine that said, basically, it was talking about life expectancy and African Americans. And his study said that a Black man living in Harlem lived fewer years than a man in Bangladesh. And so this got a whole lot of attention in the early 90s. And he came to speak at somewhere where I was. And I talked to him, and I was kind of trying to argue with him that this was about poverty. Okay, so that was me. I'm like, this is about poverty. You see, you're kind of like saying it here. And then he said, you need to come, now Harlem is where I work, and my mother lives there. But, you need to see Harlem. Harlem is not poor. 25% of people in Harlem, and it's higher now, but even then, are middle class. And so if you're putting this poverty lens on it, you don't understand that it's about as much or more about race. And so he had me come and shadow him for a day. And so he said, just don't talk much, just listen and watch what I do and who my patients are. And it was the most eye-opening, thing. And we ended up writing a story together for Essence. And I just never forgot that he was so kind. He was such a good doctor, and he was so thoughtful. And he just sort of shifted my focus in a very easygoing way. And I mean, I'm sure he doesn't even know I think like this, but he really changed my life and my thinking.
For me, like the other speakers, I also had a lot of strong female mentors. The one that really sticks out was Dr. Simpson when I worked at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. So when that was a summer research program that I joined for one summer. At that point, I was a CCNY junior, and at that point, I had a lot of wet lab experience. I had no experience in computer science related. Dr. Simpson was a full-on computer science, data analysis, machine learning mentor, PI, and I just told her, why did you accept me? And because I did not know anything about computers, and she told me, she liked me, and she said, just don't be scared of the unknown. You gotta learn. And she was the one that taught me the basics of MATLAB coding and all of the basic machine learning algorithms. She basically exposed me to a field that I did not know. I didn't understand at all. And she made me feel a little more open-minded and in a way. And I'm really thankful for that, because now I can speak in layman terms, at least, on how machine learning works. And I'm actually really grateful for that. And when I worked in NYC Health and Hospitals in the workforce development office, the whole office was women. There was just one male employee there. The whole office was women, and everyone in there was very supportive of me. They were like, they would tell me stories of their career paths and encourage me and tell me of their life lessons. Like, I really enjoyed working with over there as well. So from them, I also learned, just don't be afraid, because they all had non-linear career paths, and it's really just go out there and just learn. Don't be scared. That was me in high school. I was always scared.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all these stories. These are all such incredible anecdotes and everything that we can relate to. I think Meruna has a follow-up question she'd like to ask, or we can continue on to the third question.
We can continue to the third question. I was typing it, so.
Oh, okay.
Can I just make a quick comment about Carmen? I mean, she will freely tell us how, she was afraid to take this step and that step, even though she's in a great place now. And I just want to reassure people that, I was afraid to take, certain steps also. And I think that, knowing that others have done it and they're successful, knowing that you're surrounded by supporters, And also knowing that it's okay to make a mistake because you learn from your mistakes. Someone once told me that fear is false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. So basically, you know, that fear you have, use that to propel you, to encourage you, to really push you to the next step. And so, you know, it's okay to be afraid. It's normal. It's a normal reaction, but use that energy from that fear to push you forward and not to hold you back.
I
thank you
100%
so
agree
much.
with that, Dr. Holden. Yeah. And I think something that we're not talking about in our mentor stories is we're highlighting the glows of our champions, our supporters. We're not talking about the tormentors who are out there, and that really there can be individuals who are disguised as folks who are, you know, here to champion for your success, and they may not be the best fit person to help you be successful. I personally took some time and didn't realize I was doing this while I was applying to PhD programs, but I was thinking about the mentorship that I had as a high school student and an undergrad, and then thinking about what I wanted from my PhD advisor in order for him to be a mentor to me. Along my PhD journey, I noticed that some of my friends had difficulties with their mentors, and so we worked together to find solutions to identify people who would be able to help them be successful. So part of that embracing failure and understanding that fear is if something's not working, then it's okay to pivot. It's okay to transition out of that space and go into a supportive environment where you can thrive, because these journeys are not just about survival. It's about being able to flourish and thrive as well.
Going back to finding the perfect mentor for your PhD, I actually had to do a lot of searching when I first came to Stony Brook. I had to do like communicating with my professors because I had to take classes in my first year. So in those classes, those professors were actual PIs looking for PhD students. That's where you have to start talking to them to see how they work with their students, how they mentor, the mentoring style. And like basically just walk into the office and talk to them about the research, talk to them what they expect from students and how they mentor. Basically, yeah.
Yeah, somebody from the chat is asking, since you all mentioned the support of male colleagues, do you think women have enough allies to overcome the different obstacles in their careers? And if not, what would be some solutions to gather more allies?
I think sometimes it is really hard. It is really hard when, like, I was thinking about the idea of tormentors and just going through my head of this little list of terrible little devil horn people who have been tormentors to me. And I feel like for each tormentor, I had someone who I could call and say, I can't believe this is happening to me. And what's going on? And then the person saying, wait, that person is horrible. It's not you. And to say, leave, figure out a way to get out of that situation where you are in a more supportive environment. So I think, sometimes the people who are your allies, you don't necessarily think of them in a formal way. Like for me, it was my mother a lot. My mother was a career woman. She was an entrepreneur. So I would call her, still do, to sort through things that are happening with me. I still call that first boss that sort of walked me down off of the crazy Black radical stage and said, if you want to be in corporate America, you have all these skills and you're really smart, but you need to change your attitude a bit. And then, those are the people. And then there's people who I get a lot of good advice and help from my children who, I think that is an important, I wouldn't call them mentors. But I do think of my daughter and son as people I can call to run things by them and to say, what do you think about this? And they're like, that guy in your department really is a bad word. it is, you really need to stand up to him because it's bothering you. And, sometimes they'll give me the words for it. And so, I really appreciate thinking broad and deep, about who you seek support from and get support from.
Yeah. And we have another question. What do you consider to be your greatest achievement so far? So I think that can be answered by all four of you guys, since you're all such powerful, achieving women. So we can go in an order. We can start with Dr. Holden.
Sure. Thanks so much for that. I'm just grateful to have, I think, achieved quite a bit. I am the 5th African-American female professor in emergency medicine, which is an achievement, but it's also a tragedy because there are over 50,000 emergency medicine practitioners, most of whom are in academic centers. And to be the 5th in the country in 2018 is really saying a sad statement that, we really need to step it up quite a few notches when it comes to promoting and helping physicians, especially females, get promoted. I started a nonprofit with a couple colleagues called Mentoring in Medicine, which is a youth development nonprofit. We target low-income, first-generation students, and we start in elementary school. We go all the way through career, and the goal is to expose them first to biomedical careers, but also to engage them, provide supplemental education to what they're getting in school, and to empower them. And that was started in 2007. And since then, we have helped almost 500 students. About almost 400 of them have been accepted to medical school who were told no. And so we really specialize in helping students gain their confidence, build their social and emotional intelligence, and their leadership skills, along with academic enrichment, along with mentoring, and help them to reach their goals. So I would say that is really what I think is my greatest achievement, is to be able to take that which I learned through my experience on admissions committees for medical schools over 20 years, through my experience on residency leadership positions, and turning that into programs where I'm able to help to develop and cultivate students for what can often be a difficult path.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holden, for sharing about your experience and being able to take what you've learned and being able to make that transformative change in spaces. That is what I am doing in my role as Assistant Director for Biosciences Diversity Programs, working with faculty, with incoming PhD students, with prospective PhD students who didn't see themselves as belonging in an institution like Stanford, and being able to say, this is a place for you, you can belong here. And here is some insight on being able to not only come here, but be able to find community to flourish and thrive. I think being able to identify my greatest achievement so far is a bit challenging. Academically, yes, it's earning those letters at the beginning and end of my name, which I put on as a suit of armor in my Zoom meetings, or as a way to hype myself up and be able to be that role model to the students that I mentor, and saying, I've done it. I can empathize with when your experiment's not working, and be able to offer some perspectives there. But I think that the work is still not done, and there's still a lot for us to go. And thinking about the question before about women having enough allies, a lot of the work in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion has been built off of powerful Black feminists, and being able to continue the work that is being done involves education, and that is a toll that is taken upon many women, especially Black women, to be able to advance efforts and make change. I'm really proud to be able to have a strong colleague network where of my team of 12 to 13 people, 5 of us are women who have earned our PhDs, and 3 of the 5 are, they identify as Black women. And so being able to work together to strategize, to build a vision and transform these spaces, because yes, we are in 2021 and there has been movement, but there still needs to be a lot of work done. And revealing that folks have had blinders on is quite it's an experience in itself. And so being able to be there to say, hey, look, I understand this is your lived reality. This is not the lived reality for many other folks, including the students that you support, including the staff that you're working with. And so how do we make this a more equitable, a more inclusive opportunity where we can really make science a better place where folks feel like they belong. So still not done with the work, and I hope to have more achievements, but not to do it solo, to do it in community with other folks.
I have 2 things, and they're kind of like opposite, but they feed into each other. The first is in 2013, I only had a bachelor's degree because I came right out of college and started working. So I went back to school, to CUNY, Graduate School of Journalism, and I studied urban journalism. And it was really humbling to be back in school. At my age, I was in grad school with some of my students. So they would be like, hey, Professor V. I was like, no, don't call me that here. I'm just a regular person. I had to do an internship at the New York Times, which was really embarrassing. People were like, oh, are you working here? I'm going, well, kind of. I'm your intern. But I learned a lot. It made me really humble. It made me much more open to everything, and sort of took me down a couple of notches, which opened the door for a few years later. I wrote about why America's Black mothers and babies are in a life or death crisis. And it was like a really big story. It was nominated for a National Magazine Award, and it really changed or helped spur the sort of the movement to look at maternal mortality and infant mortality in this country, and why we're the only developed country where the numbers are going up, and why Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die related to pregnancy and childbirth, and why even a Black woman with a master's degree is more likely to die or almost die than a white woman with an 8th grade education. So that story, and I saw change happening as a result of that piece. So that I was really proud of, but it wouldn't have happened, I don't think, if I hadn't gotten sort of more education, even though it was hard for me. It was hard to go back to school at that age, but I think it was important and humbling.
I would say I'm so early in my career because I literally got my bachelor's 2 years ago. But although the only thing I can be proud of right now is I'm actually a published author for research papers in my laboratory. That's the only thing I've done so far. But in the future, I really do want to start mentoring like undergraduates and really start being the mentor that I like, the type of mentors that I had when I was a research student or a research student in the lab. So that's what I really look forward to in the future. So
yeah, something I love and appreciate that all 4 of you said is that your work isn't done yet. And although you guys have had many achievements, you guys have a long way to go and many more goals that you aspire to achieve. So thank you. The next question we have is, what would you consider to be some of the biggest challenges entailed by your field? Any specific challenges that you wish had more visibility or had greater awareness from the general public?
So I'll start off with that. So there are three challenges that that I can identify, sort of right off the top of my head. So the first challenge is, I would say, Dr. Stratton talked about the imposter syndrome earlier on. And a lot of students, especially African American and Latino students, feel that imposter syndrome. Why? Because they're often the only one or one of a few in their setting, whether it be in the hospital, whether it be in the classroom. And so oftentimes they're without people that look like them on faculty as teachers. So it can be very lonely in that sense if they're not able to utilize those social and emotional, intelligence skills to learn how to network and meet people and, really, talk to people, professors, and to get to know them along with their fellow students. So they can't live, quote unquote, in a silo in those scenarios, because they're going to have to get to know, those peers that they have, those teachers that they have. And I would even say, and this has been very helpful to me throughout all of my career, is getting to know everyone from the parking lot attendant to the environmental services person to the elevator operator. I mean, I speak to everyone. I spend some time with them, finding out about them, asking how they're doing. But it's very helpful if you have an army of people who are going to look out for you and help you along the way. So I would just say expand your network to as many people as possible. You never know who can help you. You never know who's looking out for you. So that's one. The second thing is, we have a lot of knowledge, especially now with COVID coming down the pike, and there seems to be a lot of, intellectual battling, so to speak. So, it's the onus is on me or my colleagues to continue to read the latest. As you know, information is coming out very quickly. Some information not even vetted, peer reviewed, but all of that information has to be, read about, absorbed, digested, and then turned around into taking care of patients, essentially on a daily basis. So it's important to, not be intimidated by others who, I read this article and this article said so-and-so. It may be the way that they're saying it, because they may not know too much at all. It's oftentimes the person that seems the most confident that really doesn't know anything. So you really have to take that with a grain of salt. But the point is that you have to be intellectually curious, and that, you have to be able to, read and to be able to, really regurgitate that knowledge and apply it to patients, especially now during COVID. I mean, we've learned so much just in the past year that has, saved lives. And so it's important to continue that on all levels. I mean, college students, everybody, because, you're all saving lives by the knowledge that you're soaking up and that you're spreading to our communities. And lastly, a patient population that I deal with is underserved patient population for the most part. And there are teachable moments that I have. And I think it's important to be able to take advantage of those teachable moments. For example, I had a patient the other day who came in who quite frankly said, listen, I've been having these headaches, and no, I haven't taken my high blood pressure medicine for 6 months. And his blood pressure was 185 over 125. Okay, so headaches, the differential for that could be pretty broad and pretty bad, actually. So, I use that to let him know that high blood pressure is known as the silent killer. And this is why. And this is why more Black males are on dialysis 3 times a week, tied to a machine, getting their blood taken out of them, filtered and put back into them. And I'm sure that you don't want that to happen to you. So, using the sort of mommy, sisterly, family-like, hardcore, tough love to really educate, patients who oftentimes, especially now during COVID, they've sort of forgotten about their other problems because they just don't want to get COVID, which is understandable. But you also have to, get your breast screenings and your, prostate screening and everything else we were getting before to control or prevent, other diseases.
Going back to the confidence talk that Dr. Holden was talking about, I think that is very true. You should always be confident about yourself in what you're saying, everything you do. I've had a mentor. He has always, whenever I told him something, he would always ask me, "Are you telling me? Are you sure about that?" Like he would always tell me, just trust yourself. Just do it. Because if you're not confident in yourself, you're not sure, then the other party will also be not sure. And then they would just start losing credit, like you would start losing credit in yourself. Just always be confident. That's just all I can tell right now. That's all I know right now. And so far in my career.
For my role, in light of the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others in almost, or for some cases about a year ago, that created this national awakening, and recognizing a movement towards racial justice and action. And at Stanford specifically, with various communities of graduate students, postdocs, faculty wanting to create some sort of social change and continue not only conversations, but have policies enacted. The challenges that I face is that Stanford, like many other academic institutions, is a very decentralized place. So you often will find individuals or offices doing similar types of work, and it appears that no one is talking to each other. So how are you trying to get on this machine or a body, the hand to move when it's not, receiving a message from the brain properly and it's trying to do its own thing? So like Dr. Holden was saying, is it's been important for me to be able to understand, get to know the different stakeholders at play, what have been the demands of our students to not just the president and provost, but how can we take those demands and put it into action on a local level? And how can we work with our communities to be mindful of the relationships that we are building with minority serving institutions, especially HBCUs, and not jeopardize those relationships, because now these programs are getting inundated with messages on recruit at Stanford, or we want to make this change. So I'm really proud that we've been able to utilize these opportunities as teachable moments to capitalize on, that energy, that momentum, and keep it going, because that's really how institutional change happens. It's poignant by these events, but it really takes time and effort in thinking about the long-term vision and where we want to transform our community. So one of the resources that we developed is this Biosciences Commitment to Justice and Action, which is prominent on our website as well. And we also utilized this opportunity to create a resource document to support our Black community members, given that they were and are in need of the most support, and yet their numbers are still very few in the biosciences. And another resource that has been really helpful in reminding me of the social change ecosystem, my role in it, is that there are many ways to transform and change, and my role may pivot and alter depending on the audience or the collaborators I'm working with. And so this Medium article had one of the best visual pieces of how to do this work and where our involvement may be.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting question. It's a really important time right now. And when I'm in groups like this, I get really happy because it's people who more like think alike. But then once you wander outside by, accident or whatever, however you escape the bubble, And then you run into somebody who, or something, someplace that doesn't think like I do or we do, it's jarring. That happened to me not that long ago. It was right before COVID, and I got invited to do a grand rounds at in a small mid-sized Midwestern town in Minnesota. And so it was at a community hospital. So I go, and it's the OBGYN department. So it's 12 people. I'm the 13th. So they asked me about my maternal and infant mortality story. So I'm telling them the story, and it's the main character is this woman who lost a baby and almost died in childbirth, then got pregnant again, and then had a doula at her birth. And me and the doula were with her, and I saw the medical staff treat her really terribly right in front of us. It was horrible. And it was like very touch and go because of their behavior. So I wrote about that. So when I was in the grand rounds with these doctors, they were like, they had read the article, and they were so argumentative with me. And they said, well, the reason that happened to her is because she was poor. It's like, okay, I learned that lesson from Dr. Freeman years ago. So for God's sake, y'all shouldn't be still saying that. And they were like, well, she wasn't taking care of herself. Nutrition, if she had, and I said, I didn't say she wasn't eating. I didn't say anything about that. You made that assumption about her because she's Black. And then, it was like, well, is there some genetic problem? I'm like, infant mortality is not a genetic issue. It's like, this has long been known. And so I had to send them the research on that. And then it was kind of like, well, Black people in America do not have the same kind of kinship networks that Black women in Africa had. And I'm staring at this guy like, what are you talking about? That's where Black people got the networks from, our African ancestors. What are you talking? It was so crazy. But every single thing that they said was wrong. And it was shocking. And these were they were running a hospital. And so I was so upset after I left. And I realized after I left that room, there were 13 of us in the room. 12 of them are white. So I was the only Black person. I don't work there. And so when I got back, I looked at that town more carefully, and they had an influx of Somali immigrants. And there had been hugely anti-immigrant, really cruel treatment of them. And I just started thinking, my God, what is going to happen to them in this setting with people like this? And I just thought, you know what, the work we do, we can't assume everybody is on the board with making social change, even in the face of our reckoning, you know what I mean? And in the face of our sort of awakening, there are still people who are not woken up. And we have to remember that. And, I always kind of like think about where I am, slow down. It's like, read the room kind of thing, because there's still a lot of work to do.
It's interesting, Ms. Villarosa, that you said that, because, all the studies, for example, and now that we have health disparities, health differences, and we have researchers who are actually dedicating their life's work to finding out, where the differences are between, different populations. An example is that all of the studies on heart attacks were done on white males long ago. Then about 8 to 10 years ago, studies were done, and it was found that Black females, minorities, females, present differently than white males. And so now it's well known that, a minority or a female can come in with feeling as if they have gas or feeling anxious. And these could all be signs that they are having a heart attack, essentially. But imagine how many women, how many minorities died because their complaints were poo-pooed and weren't taken seriously. So, there's studies that are coming out that, point out differences on how medications work because of melanin versus no melanin. So there are different studies coming out, but the sad thing is that people look at things through their own lens. Those people were looking at, their situation about females and births, infant mortality through their lens of this, from the population that they're dealing with. And the tragedy is that they're not willing to open up and to read and to learn about these social justice issues that affect medicine, and especially now during COVID, that COVID is affecting Black and brown populations so much worse than others.
I think the story that really got to me was Dr. Susan Moore. So if you don't know what happened to her, she was a physician, Black woman physician in Indianapolis. And so she got COVID, went to her hospital, and she was treated so poorly. And the more she knew, the worse she was treated. So first she said she was in intense pain, and then she was denied pain medication. And she felt like the medical providers were thinking she was drug seeking because she was asking for more pain medication. The second was she was talking about, well, I know what the treatment is here. And they were like, no, and didn't give her all of the standard treatment, and were trying to release her from the hospital early. So then she ended up making a Facebook post on a Facebook video on, I think, December 4th, 2020, and where she talked about this from her hospital bed with tubes in her nose. And remember, she's a physician. And so then she left the hospital, and then she died. So, and in her video, she said several times, this is how Black people get killed. So they asked the people at the hospital, the hospital administrators later, what happened there. And one of the answers was many on the staff were intimidated by her knowledge. So it interfered with her care, or intimidated by her expertise and use of the internet, on Facebook. So it was like, well, if you're competent, if you're knowledgeable, why should that be your death sentence? Except that if there's a stereotype running around that Black women are angry, Black women are, uppity. And if these stereotypes are hanging out, then none of us can avoid them, as even if you're a physician who's supposed to be doing no harm. That is how Black people get killed. And I never forgot that those were the words she said, and that was exactly what happened to her.
Yeah, I also see Dr. Stratton added some more resources and links about this conversation. Now we're about to close up our conversation. If anyone would like to ask any questions, now is the time to unmute yourselves. If there's any questions or inquiries you'd like to ask our 4 amazing panelists.
I'd like to ask something. So I'm a biology major and I minor in English. So I kind of have like this double interest. I love science, but I also love reading and writing. So I'm curious to know if there are any books or works of literature that really inspired you and impacted your work. I do believe that like books and the written word has a lot of influence on who you are and like things that you believe, and they could really make an impact in your life. So I'd like to know if there are any books that you would recommend to young women. I guess we could start with Ms. Villarosa, since you do have the background in journalism.
Here are the 2 that really made a difference for me. One is called Killing the Black Body by Dr. Dorothy Roberts. So it's about these ideas of sort of the racism that runs through science and medicine, and it has since slavery. I would say also Medical Apartheid is the same kind of book. Those 2 are the ones that really, for me, made me see the link about race and racism in medicine. They're both written by women. It inspired me for the work I did on the 1619 project, both of them. And I'm really grateful for those 2 authors. I was such a fangirl that I had, when I saw Dr. Roberts maybe 2 years ago, her book had been reissued. So when it was first issued, I think in 1990, it was like, oh yeah, this is a good book, very interesting. But by 20 years later, when it was reissued, it had blurbs by like Angela Davis, and everybody had blurbed it. And it was a huge thing, and people were saying it just changed their lives. So when I went to go get her autograph, I had both copies. Such a nerd. I asked, can you sign both of them? You're so great. So I think those for me. The other one, Medical Apartheid, is by Harriet Washington.
I will say, I will agree with Ms. Villarosa that Medical Apartheid has definitely been eye-opening. I would say that's one book that should be read. Also, I am very much into this social and emotional intelligence because, in emergency medicine, you really have to develop a quick rapport with patients and they have to trust you with their lives, essentially. So I would recommend that everyone read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's a quick read, but the points that are made are so salient to your journey. And while your journey is about, doing well in class, getting your GPA, getting a certain GPA, making sure it's competitive, making sure your MCAT scores are competitive, it's also about who you know and how you get to know those people, and how they can influence your life. I often say, this journey is not only about the academics, but it's about you following your passion, you persevering when the times get rough, and also the people that you know, your network. And How to Win Friends and Influence People will really help you accelerate meeting people, even if it's virtually.
I dropped in the chat 2 books, one that I have read and one that is sitting in my home and waiting for me to read. I felt that Biased by Jennifer Eberhardt was a fantastic book and narrative on how racial bias has influenced many parts, or every part of America, from education, from the prison system and policing. And she does a really great job bringing in her research and her narrative into the space that it's very accessible, and there are footnotes to be able to look further in the research. And the second book that I had mentioned is by Dr. Malika Grace, and it's a memoir about her PhD journey. And I just wish that I had something like that when I started my PhD in 2013, so that I could see someone who was successful, was able to thrive, and could utilize that information to build up my own self-resilience.
A book that I got attached to that I've read was called Falling Leaves by Adeline Yen Ma. This book, it's a memoir about a Chinese woman in the late 50s and 60s, if I remember correctly. But she became a doctor during those turbulent times where women was really underrepresented. There was not a lot of women in the science at all. And she became a doctor through all of the hardships. And that book just made me realize, like, no matter how hard it is, this woman still became a doctor during those times. I think I can manage. I can do something too, kind of thing.
I love these books. I wanted to add The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke-Harris. She's a Black woman pediatrician in California, now California's Surgeon General. But as being a pediatrician, she realized that she was speaking to her patients and their parents without looking into what was going on in their emotional lives, or even, not just their emotional lives, but their life outside of just the body and just the exam room. And so she created this ACEs scales that people could, find out about their level of trauma and what had happened in their lives. And if you can't get through her whole book, which is good, I get it, Deepest Well, she has a really good TED Talk, and she's really fashionable. So then, she's really tall, and she has these long legs, and she has this cute clothes, and she's very dynamic. And so I remember interviewing her and then seeing the TED Talk, and I was like, went back and interviewed her, and I was like, oh, okay, you are very charismatic. And I'm really happy about her being the Surgeon General of California. That's a really important job right now.
Yeah, thank you for all of these book suggestions, and thank you for the amazing questions, Sasha. Now we have a whole library of books that we can read.
I do have a question, if I may add, like very quickly, and I think it's to everyone, and maybe you, Right. So we haven't talked about the work-life balance, and this is something that for sure, like we wonder, I think like so many of us, how do you manage to be so amazing at your jobs and balancing the work life? So of course, like we don't have time perhaps to debate like on like what do we have to sacrifice and whatnot. But what I would like to ask is what makes you happy? Like what would be like one thing that makes you just like balance the work and yeah, kind of recharge the batteries when there is a tough day at work or when there's so many obstacles to overcome. And again, this question is for everyone, so whoever wants to start first.
So I will say that I have always been rooted in spiritual roots from the time I was a child. I'm actually a deacon at Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. So that is definitely one, one of the main, what I can say, stress relief sort of guides me in what I do. The other is my family. And I will just say that to all those women who are thinking about, can I do this and have a family? The answer is yes. I will say that the biggest asset is your support system. And while you may not be there all the time, hopefully you'll be able to get relatives, neighbors, friends, church members who are able to, that you trust, who can help you when it comes to raising children and all those chores that you may have to do, but maybe you can't because you're studying for a test, or you have an experiment in the lab, you have to stay late. I am very grateful, very, very grateful to my many supporters who helped me to raise my daughter, who's now actually is married herself and not pregnant, but married herself. So, it's really important, I would say, to be able to, when you say juggling, it's not really juggling because you are dealing with all aspects of your life, to have a support system. And my second how to go to statement is never miss any of those milestones. So even if your child is a tree in a play, they're looking for you to be in the front row. So if you have one eye open and one eye closed, just make sure you're there. So don't miss those key milestones, because time flies by when you have children.
For me, it's building off of what Dr. Holden had said about having a support system, and it has been learning how to say no and being unapologetic with using that word, and listening to my body and what I need. So I have realized that I need a certain amount of sleep every day, otherwise I'm not functionable, or I need to take this break and eat some food and drink some water. It's the basic needs and taking care of myself. This article, this Medium article that I put in here actually has one of my favorite Audre Lorde quotes about how taking care of yourself is not self-indulgent, and that it's self-preservation, and how important it is. And that I've used that as a virtual background. I really appreciated what this author was saying about thinking about self-care and not it being from a place of consumerism, but rooting back into what do you need? What does your body need? And I also have different affirmations that I've written down on sticky notes or through the I Am app on my phone. And so one of the affirmations that has come up is everything I did today was enough. And that has been helpful in being able to take a step back and say, this is enough. There will be things that I will do tomorrow. My inbox is not at 0. That's okay. This is enough. You can now go watch whatever's on Netflix or Lifetime.
Well, first, I'm going to tell my mom that I met Dr. Holden, who's a deacon at her church. I am like a work machine. And so like everything in my life is super regimented. Like I get up really early, same time I do this, have a little to-do list, but I include pleasure in that, therapy in that, exercise in that, cooking, which is a form of pleasure that I really love. I love to go fishing April 1st is trout season. So me and my fishing buddy, Mike, will be going fishing all the time. And it's a way to get close to to get out in nature for me. I play soccer on this like really crazy co-ed, all age intergenerational pickup game on weekends. We're just starting back with masks now. And I really am dedicated to that. I'm an organizer so that we can keep it going. And that's a way to socialize and, do something healthy. So I really believe in that. And I believe in, I schedule myself to make time for all those things, all the work things and all the, other things. But I also agree with you, if not everything gets checked off on the to-do list, it's like, okay, you did your best for that day. So tomorrow, start again.
Can I just say that the world is very small, okay, and gets smaller every day. So just realize that. Linda, just tell your mother that I'm Andrew Morrison's wife, and she'll get it. Yeah. But just remember that people are watching you, and the world is very small.
Yes, and building off of that, Linda, you've actually connected with my partner, Nicholas St. Fleur. So yes, the world is very, very small indeed.
I'm staring at his name. I was like, what is Nick doing here? And then I'm like trying to type him, but I can't see his name in the chat. It's like, Nick, why are you here?
He's being a supportive partner.
I just was bragging about him. Nick, I was bragging about you. They were talking about, oh, I want to talk to some up and coming journalists. Well, Nick St. Fleur is one of them who, and I was thinking about that with mentorship, because we had a conversation where I think he was thinking he'd be a mentee to me, but I was thinking he's more like a mentor. I was loving, his career and all that he's done. So you never know where you're going to get, stuff from. So I'm glad. I didn't even know that. That's wonderful.
For me, whenever there is a bad day, I always have to sit down and tell myself what I need to do better. Make a list of things, what I need to do better, what I need to change for the next day. It's always one step at a time. It even help if you do bullet journaling, any type of journaling. And then during downtimes, I would just start my own little creative projects like knitting, drawing. I knit a lot of clothes. So it's always some kind of hobby that you should do to get your mind off of your work life, anything. And just always remember to take care of yourself needs. As Dr. Stratton has said, take care of yourself needs, always take care of yourself needs.
Yeah, and to wrap up, we have our last question. That is, if there is one message that you would like to give to the women or individuals who want to follow in your footsteps, what would it be? And that question is for everybody. So let's start with Dr. Stratton this time.
You are worthy, you are valuable, and you are enough.
You are unstoppable.
Failure is not scary.
Okay, mine's going to be a little bit wordy, but I think that many of us have things that are internal and, like are part of us, like Carmine talking about how hard you work. And, like that is really somebody, no matter what you're in, whatever field you're in, if you have that, you really work hard. All of us here are like, we're really determined. All of us here are really giving. So those are things that, all of us are talking about the importance of self-care. So it doesn't matter what job you're doing or what career you're doing. Once you have those things, those internal drivers, and also those internal, that's not a driver, but it's the thing, your kindness, and you're wanting to give back, and you're wanting to do better, and you're wanting to change the world. No matter what you do, as long as you bring those things out into the world, you'll be successful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for giving us all of your inspiring messages and stories, and for connecting in the middle also. And I'll hand it off to Zipporah Schwat, our president, to close off our panel.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Marilyn said, just thank you. Thank you for your words of wisdom, for taking time out of your undoubtedly busy schedules to speak with us. And I know everyone here appreciated hearing from you all. So thank you. And the chat is blowing up with thank yous. Also, thank you to everyone who attended. Yeah, welcome to Women in Science.
Take good care, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. And I look forward to connecting with you all. This is such a huge uplifting moment in my day, week. So thank you.
Thank you so much for attending, and we will definitely share our next events with you all, and hopefully we'll stay connected. We learned so much from you all today, and I really appreciate your presence here. Thank you, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Feel free to contact me if you need. Thank you.
We'll do for sure. All of you.
Very
Take
good.
care. Have a nice day. Stay
Bye-bye.
safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Where will the link be shared? We're going to send it out to everyone, yes?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk more about that and we'll get the link out so everyone has the recording as well.
Yes. It's just us now. Well,
Yeah.
let me stop recording.